Shulim and Brocha. Let's visit another time, another place. Picture Poland just after the First World War. The religious world was going through tremendous upheaval, social changes following on from the First World War had surrounded our kehillas and started to impact on the youth. So that's the year 1923. In a small town near Varasha, a Rebbe opened a yeshiva. The Rebbe's name was Harav Klonimus Kalman Shapira. The town was Piaseczna. And from these small beginnings, a huge oil, a light, illuminated the world. The Rebbe proved to be a brilliant pedagogue, and soon his students were counted in the thousands. His success was the result of a deep-rooted understanding of the young generation. I remember hearing that the Bova Rebbe Reb Shlomo, when he was the Rosh Yeshiva in Bobov in the Heim, he was in Warsaw for a conference, and he sat for several hours with the Piaseczna Rebbe, asking him different questions about chinuch. So the Rebbe touched each student at the pintala that motivated that child's neshama, his inner point. And this was the total understanding of everything falls from that point. Everything is created from that point of knowing the nekuda from that child. And each of his students reflected the love that he gave them back to him. So the Rebbe wrote several sforim, only one of which was printed in his lifetime. It's called Chayves HaTalmidim, and it contains the Rebbe's advice to Buchim. He wrote a textbook for kids. It was meant for the students on how to achieve spiritual growth. The Sefer is considered a work of a major brilliance from the day it was published, and it's still used in yeshivas today. So the first chapter, however, was not for the children, it was for the parents and the teachers. And I just want to share with you a few snippets from that chapter. I think you'll be amazed on how much things never change. And although addressing a different time and a different era, he actually is speaking to us today, and it speaks to us clearly with clarity. So he says like this: to truly educate is not just a matter of getting a child to follow your commandments, or even getting the child accustomed to doing good deeds. True education, says the Rebbe, is a much greater and more galvanizing process. Someone who tries to educate through command and habit need not pay any attention to the child at all. He doesn't have to worry about his nature, the way he thinks, any of his distinguishing characteristics. The command itself, do this, do that, is all that is needed. Nor is it necessary to deal with each student separately. A single command suffices for the entire age group. For it is not the student or the child that is important, but the person who's giving the commandments. He has commanded, and that is everything. Says the Rebbe, but by contrast, there is an educator who wishes to uncover the soul, the neshama of the child, that inner being that is hidden and concealed within each of us. He wants to help ignite and allow to grow so that that child will burn with a heavenly fire towards everything that is holy, so that the student's entire being, including his physical body, will increase in his kedusha, in his holiness, and will long for Hashem's Torah. Such an educator, says the Rebbe, must adapt himself attentively to the child. He must penetrate into the midst of that child's limited consciousness and the small-mindedness until he reaches that spark. And then he can help it emerge and blossom. I'll tell you, the very marrow of your bones feel the power of these words. The Rebbe goes on to explain why his generation's youth were often turned away from traditional Torah. And time and again he keeps telling us, teachers, it's up to you. You must take the responsibility to find the nakuda, the spark, with every child. One must penetrate into that child's life, says the Rebbe. Bring him close, ignite his heart and his soul until they are dedicated to Kaviyuchel to the Eibishter. Again, he says, the education of each child must be different, depending on that child's nature, his mind, his character, and all his other unique qualities. On it goes, this plea, this indictment, this tefillah, this prayer. Please, he cries, give our young their Torah identity. Most of you will be aware that this huge light of understanding, this tzaddik, ultimately he became the father of hundreds of orphans in the darkness of the Warsaw ghetto. He was the last Hasidic Rebbe surviving the fires and the ruins. And ultimately, he died al Kiddush Hashem in Treblinka in 1943. And throughout all his writings, especially this chapter of Choves HaTalmidim, he shows a deep understanding of what a Torah Rebbe must be. He points out that it's not what the teacher wants to say, but what the student can understand and accept that counts. I'll just share with you a passage from the third Mishna of the third chapter of Pirkei. Maybe we can understand this dynamic a bit clearer. Rabbi Hananya ben Teradian says, if two sit together and there are no words of Torah between them, it is a session of scorners. Goes on further to say, however, when two people sit together and there are words of Torah between them, the divine presence dwells amongst them. So the Kotzker Rebbe, interestingly, the Vurker Rebbe, his colleague, both point out that the understanding of this Mishnah should be read literally. If there is not between them, this in itself are words of Torah. What does that mean? If two people sit together and there's nothing that comes between them, if they relate to each other with humility, with love, this in itself is Torah. Only when one looks down on the other and doesn't think about the other's needs or disdains the other's situation, that becomes a meeting of scorners. Teachers bring into classrooms their own egos, their own insecurities, dare I say, their own emotional baggage. That's normal. We're human beings, we're not malachim. However, if the Rebbe lets this get in the way of his teaching, it becomes a wall between his student and himself. And then there could be no Torah, because the Rebbe is acting on his own needs and not that of the kids. I'll give you an example. I recently had a situation. A child was being bullied by classmates. By the way, bullying is not a simple situation. Petty playground crime, that's not what this. Bullying is a soul-destroying activity. It goes against everything our Torah teaches us. And it should never, again, never be allowed. To go and say, well, it's part of growing up, it's not really, that's, you don't understand, you're missing the point. This is a violation that bullied children live with. So in this particular case was interesting because this kid didn't seem to be a victim, the average type of a kid that you could see. He had always been, he was never, and all of a sudden he became like the outsider. So how did it happen? I looked into it. That it started that the teacher felt a loss with this kid. He couldn't connect with the kid. He tried to, it wasn't working, right? Rather than question himself, he gave off the signal that the child is not worthy. There's something wrong with this kid. Other children picked it up, and that's how it became a free-for-all, that this kid became an 8-year-old victim. So at one time, the parents told the kid, just stay away from the bad boys. Stand on the corner, on the side while playing. The child turned to his mother and said, "Hey, Mommy, I do that. But you know, it's very lonely in there." An 8-year-old Yiddish child should never be lonely. No child could be so bad that we should allow for such a crime. It's really all about sitting together and what's going on between them. Teachers and parents can never allow themselves to forget. Don't let your own problems get in the way. Children turn from Torah, chas v'sholem, and even become scorners if they are not taught in a way that they could hear. Now, there are those who will say, you don't understand, we have large classes, it's very difficult, I can't win them all. And some kids just get lost in the shuffle, Rabbi. And to this, there is only one response. Look at the real Rebbes, the real Das Torah. Look at the Chayvis Talmid. Do you think he ever thought that there was a kid that can't be touched, can't be reached? We, as parents and teachers, must take the responsibility to find that spark in every Jewish child. Let me just tell you something. We are all teachers today. Kids are not going to school. Maybe they are on the phone with their rebbes for some time of the day. And it's very taxing. A lot of parents say, oh, I'm not used to this. Now's the time to learn your kid, to find out in this, just find out who your kid is. How can we just allow others to, it's not on. That's why I've always said that we need mentoring, because some children need more attention. Fine. There's plenty of opportunity. We have to create mentoring as a profession. It's just in this difficult world with large classes and everything, we need a group of young people who mentor, who could take a kid out and buy a pizza with them and not be the Rebbe, but just be the guy, so that he could open himself up and have some positive input in his life. The name's Chusama Allah Geholfenberg. We should get back out of the circumstances that we find ourselves in today, where we're all staying at home and we can't even go to schools. Let our tefillahs open up our hearts. Let our children find out who they are.